to my mind, what are the critical success factors for a SaaS business, right? And there are a lot of critical success factors out there. And let me look at the business angle of it. So the first question really to ask is, how are you really innovating? Is there innovation in the true sense? Now, if you ask most founders, they will say, yes, we have an innovation. But when they actually go out into the market and when they test it, the answer could be quite different. So let me just give you an example. So I recollect about 6 years ago, I was advising a company called Infido, which is doing now extremely well in the employee engagement space. And those days, I recollect the only way in which organizations could get a temperature of their employees was really via these annual surveys. So most companies were just using annual surveys, and there were lots of platforms available for these annual surveys. So Infido actually created that innovation by saying that, we have a bot which can engage with employees on an ongoing basis based on their stage, based on their life cycle in the company, in a very human way, and start getting real-time feedback. And the advantage of real-time feedback is that then you really know what is happening with your employees. You know what are the concerns that are there, what is going well, what's not going too well. And you're also able to understand who are the employees who are perhaps dissatisfied and likely to leave, and so on and so forth. So, we were able to innovate and bring something unique. Now, having said that, 6 years down the line, there are lots of companies which are doing it, but having that initial advantage, makes a significant difference. The other area really is that are you able to identify a gap in the market segment? So, for example, as I mentioned earlier, there are lots of red oceans today. Most areas that you look at are full of red oceans. There are plenty of companies that are operating in it. So, is there a way in which, if you're not able to innovate in that core area, is there an adjacency that you can focus on? Because that's another great way in which one can actually drive success. And let me give you an example here. I came across a very interesting company out of Singapore by the name of NextPage. This is a SaaS company in the B2C space. And let me just give you some background. Today, there are lots of organizations, which are converting books into ebooks and things of that kind, so that you can, read it online. There are a whole lot of companies which have also built capabilities in creating summaries of these books. So you've got a large book, most people don't have the time to read it. They'd be quite happy to read a summary of that book. And that's big business now. There are lots of companies doing it. But what NextPage has done is they have looked at an adjacency. They've said that, look, can we look at language books in certain languages, and can we translate them into other languages in which our audience is there, and create summaries of those. So they've identified Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, and they've looked at some great books which otherwise people would not have access to, and they have translating them into Southeast Asian languages like Malay and Filipino and Thai and Indonesian and Vietnamese and so on, and English, and saying that, look, therefore now there could be a whole new market which has access to books from China and Korea and so on, which otherwise they would, and Japan, which otherwise they would not have access to. So I think it's important to start looking at perhaps some of these adjacencies. There are lots of questions streaming out there, but let me just finish my thoughts around some of the critical success factors before I take them up. The third thing is really establishing product market fit, and I want to talk in a little more detail because this is a very important area, and a lot of SaaS founders tend to underestimate product market fit. So it's really about, are there some early adopters? Are there some early pilots that you can get going, which really tells you that your product is actually fitting into the kind of market requirement that you have, and the market requirement is fairly significant. The fourth area that I just wanted to touch upon is really the ability of founders to be able to pivot at an early stage. So talking really about an Infido example, when we started, we were having an idea generation platform, a town hall platform. And I think we quickly realized that it was important to get into into an area based on feedback that we were getting from heads of HR, into an area that was really more important than all this. And that's how the pivot really happened into employee engagement. And then that business has really grown at a very, very significant rate. Fifthly, I think also it's important for startups to see what does it take for setting up some partnerships at an early stage. And this is something that I've realized a lot of startup founders struggle with, because they do not know that, look, if they have an innovation, there could be a great opportunity for a partnership even at an early stage. And that's something that I've actually personally specialized in, to really figure out what are those golden nuggets available in that startup, and is there a way in which we can plug that into a bigger system and therefore get the entire go-to-market engine going. So, for instance, recently, we did a partnership of a learning platform called ICOG. We did a partnership with an HRMS platform, and by doing that, we were able to immediately access over 700 customers of the HRMS product company. Likewise, there could also be opportunities of doing a white label deals. Now, this is something, again, sometimes SaaS founders are very hesitant to do. They feel that it should be all about their brand, but it's really about momentum. It's about product market fit. It's about acceleration. So sometimes there could be great opportunities of doing some of these white label. There could be some great white label opportunities out there. In fact, currently, I'm taking some great SaaS companies from Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific into the US, and many of them are very early stage, but we are looking at some very significant white label opportunities in the US. Because if you look at the US market, you'll find that the US market has been around the tech space has been around for a much longer time. So there's a lot of legacy products, and many of them are now looking at replacing the legacy with state-of-the-art tech. And sometimes it may not be possible to go and build everything yourself, and it may be much faster for you to actually go and do a white label, right? So that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about. Then there's this whole thing around platform versus product. So sometimes when you build a product, you might say that I want to do something which is more end-to-end, which is a platform, versus something which is very narrow. And let me again give you an example to illustrate this. There's a company that I work with called MapRecruit, which is a talent acquisition platform. And they do everything right from sourcing of CVs from job boards to parsing them. They parse the job descriptions. They do a matching ranking of CVs with job description. Then they do a prioritization, or what we call as stack ranking of the CVs against those job descriptions. And then it moves to the next stage, which is the interviewing. So they have a video interviewing platform. They have an audio bot which can do an interview. They also have a chat bot which can engage with candidates and prioritize the kind of roles that they should actually apply for. So it's a complete platform that they have end to end. At the same time, they're also able to sell them as independent products. So if somebody says, I only want a great parser, they're able to do that. Somebody says, I just want a video interviewing platform, they're able to do that. So sometimes it's important for you to realize that, hey, do we take a platform approach? Because that also gives you a scope for you to be more end-to-end. At the same time, it opens up doors for certain narrow opportunities on specific products that you have within the platform. Then there's the example of SaaS companies of whether they should take a single product or a multi-product approach. And often it's advised that you take a single product approach, and then you build scale, you get 500,000 customers, and then you build your second product, which can hopefully you can sell to which is in an adjacent space, but the decision maker is common. So I think that gives a great traction for you to be able to accelerate your revenues as well. So that's really a single versus multiple product. I've also come across some great opportunities where you look at I spoke about product versus platform. It could also be product versus technology. So I came across this very interesting company called All Sorted out of Ireland, who have built a great technology for redacting information. So they've come out with different use cases. So the first use case was to determine how redaction of content can add value to diversity hiring, for instance. Likewise, they're now looking at a second use case in the healthcare space, and there's a third use case in the education space. And finally, I think it's also important for SaaS startups as one of the critical success factors to have an open architecture, because today, as I had mentioned before, when you go into an enterprise, you'll find that they have several products. Many of these large enterprises may have 200 plus SaaS products out there. So how is it that your product can fit into a bigger ecosystem? So that's something which again you should actually look at.